and he sees the rabbi crawling on the floor. Such activities do not jive with the position of Melech Yisrael.
Hey, what you gonna be for Purim?
That's not kosher. I'm a dog.
I'm gonna be a poodle.
That's stupid.
Rav Machla said it was a great idea.
Well, why don't you dress up like him then?
Fine, I will.
That's not kosher. You're a dog. I tricked you.
I'm pretty.
Ooh, a bird.
Can we ask you a question? Do you celebrate Purim? Do you know anything about Purim?
Yes, it's important to me. I'm Jewish. I'm celebrating the Jewish holidays.
Queen Esther and Mordecai.
It's a traditional Jewish holiday.
When the kids were little, yes.
Purim is the getting of the Torah in action.
When the kids were little, of course, they dressed up. But other than that, no.
Now my kids get drunk. They didn't used to.
And what do you think of that?
They're grown up.
My deepest and sincerest blessings to each of you for the sweetest and most all-encompassing celebration of this great holiday of Purim. To the untrained eye, Purim may be the most difficult of holidays to comprehend. The parties, the masquerades, the drinking, the merriment, the singing, the dancing. Where is the religious expression in this festival? The Baal Shem Tov offers the following parable. A great musician was once playing the most beautiful melodies with a wondrous rhythm and the greatest and sweetest melodies ever heard in the world. All those who heard the music were enthralled and captivated by the sweetness and joy of the melodies. They swayed, they rocked, they danced until they were almost reaching and touching the ceiling. The entire hall was filled with great joy. The closer one came to the musician, the greater was the level of pleasure experienced. A deaf man came along. The deaf man could not hear the beautiful music at all. All he saw were wild people excitedly dancing. He thought, they're all mad. If the deaf man would have been wise, he would have understood that something was motivating these masses of people. Perhaps he could have understood or deduced that beautiful melodies were being played. Not only would he appreciate the motions and activities of these people that he thought were mad, he too would have begun dancing with them. If only we would take the time to study the inner meanings, the inner levels of Purim, we would all learn to appreciate the millions of Jews who reach levels of celebration which seem beyond. Is it holy or is it silly to dance wildly on Purim?
We call it l'chaim. You know what l'chaim means? L'chaim means for life. So we do a little l'chaim in order to relieve ourselves, not to get drunk. Chas v'shalom. The idea is to be like a perfume. We call it lidbasem. Lidbasem in Hebrew, in the holy language, it means to get perfumed. It says in the Torah that when a person drinks wine, he gets the idea of secrets.
In the great celebration of the Ark of God, we read of the exuberant expression of King David. David and the entire house of Israel together were rejoicing before God with many types of musical instruments, harps, lyres, drums, cymbals. David mifazez u'mecharker lifnei Hashem. David was leaping, was dancing wildly before God. His modes of expression knew no bounds. As the procession approached the city of David, Michal, wife of King David, daughter of King Saul, looked out of her window and saw her husband behaving in a way which she considered to be totally inappropriate. Such activities do not jive with the position of Melech Yisrael. Vativez lo b'liba. She became contemptuous of him in her heart. When David HaMelech later arrives home, he is greeted by Michal with the following condescending words. Vatomer, ma nechbad hayom, Melech Yisrael, asher nigla hayom le'einei amhot avadav, ki higalot niglot ahad harikim. Cynically, perhaps, Michal says to her husband, how distinguished was the king of Israel today? How distinguished was this king who exposed himself in the presence of his servants' maids as one of the boors, as a boor would be exposed. According to one reading, maybe some of the royal robes flew up as he was dancing. Maybe part of the legs of King David became exposed. Is that appropriate for a king? You're jumping wildly. Perhaps Rekim, perhaps empty-headed people celebrate in that way. Not Melech Yisrael. Michal viewed the festivities as being irreverent. David answers her. Vayomer David el Michal lifnei Hashem. I wasn't just being wild. It wasn't just an outrageous form of expression. It was all being done in honor of God. My expressions of joy were godly. They weren't shallow or silly. There is a time to let go and enter realms of celebrations which would otherwise be improper. Chapter 6, that very chapter discussing the David and Michal encounter, ends with the following sad words. Ule Michal bat Shaul lo haya lah yaled ad yom motah. Michal, daughter of Shaul, had no child until the day of her death. May all of the suffering challenges of fertility issues, may all those going through those issues today be blessed immediately. May the gateways of childbirth be open for all of them forever.
When two people are having a drink, it joins them together. And we're having that drink in order to realize that there's more things that's only what we see. And the Purim is a celebration of our reliving as a Jewish person, as a Jewish nation. Each year to relive ourselves to that point of receiving the Torah, receiving the idea of what is being a Jew means.
There are many elements in bearing and rearing children, which to some may seem to be the opposite of prim and proper. How dignified is it to tickle a baby? How distinguished is it to roll and crawl lovingly with an infant on the floor? Can highly respectable people, can esteemed individuals find their way to somersaults on the rug? Lifnei Hashem. All of these activities are holy. It is lofty to engage in these types of actions in the proper environment. On Purim, we act in ways which are sublime, although not necessarily visibly so. In the Midrash, we study of a great rabbi whose mission it was to carry out and execute a particular last will and testament. The clear instructions of the deceased individual seem to indicate that he was not to bequeath the property to the heir until the particular person would act in a silly way. a silly way? He didn't understand it. And the Midrash tells about how he decided he's going to consult with one of the greatest rabbis of the generation. He makes the trek, he takes the trip to the home of the great rabbi. He walks in and he sees the rabbi crawling on the floor. He sees the rabbi with a baby crawling up and down his chest. And he's crawling after the baby on the floor. How strange. The chief rabbi on the floor with a baby, what is he doing? And he asks the rabbi two questions. He says, Rabbi, I came here because I can't figure out the inner meaning of this will, and I want to carry out mitzvah lishmoa divrei hamet. And number two, Rabbi, what are you doing on the floor? And he said the answer to both questions is one and the same. The intention of this person was, don't give over this property to my child until he too is a parent. Because every parent has to be involved in some form of silliness, and if not, then perhaps they don't understand parenthood. You know what I'm doing on the floor? I'm playing with my baby. What could be greater than playing with a baby? And that's the intention. To some, it may seem silly. To others, it's the greatest of activities. Ahanyale shtute l'sabam. I now understand that the activities which I thought were foolish, the activities which I thought were silly on the part of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak are really sublime. You know, in Kohelet, I believe it's the 10th chapter of Ecclesiastes, we read, Yakar mechochma mikavod, sichlut ma'at. More precious than wisdom, more precious than honor, is just a little bit of silliness. Foolish activities, maybe that's even deeper than the chokhmah and the kavod of the rest of the year. May God open all gateways of sweetness and of happiness for you. And may we all merit to understand the true levels of the celebration of Purim. Shalom, Purim Samech. We have a teaching that a person should always be aware of that which is above them. Da malamala mimcha, you know.
Should people get drunk on Purim? Why or why not?
This is a very complicated question. So there's a vast literature on this topic. You don't need my opinion because some of the greatest rabbis, some of the greatest codifiers spoke about this issue. There are those who say that just drinking a little bit of wine and celebrating, that's the spirit of Purim. There are those who say that the literal reading of the Talmud seems to indicate even to the state of drunkenness, ad lo yada, bein arur Haman lebaruch Mordechai, to go to the level where one doesn't even understand clear levels of distinction between Haman and Mordechai. If you're asking my opinion, I would say it depends on how a person would behave when they get drunk and what their intention is. If it's just to escape and to run away, I mean, that's one type of activity. If they're doing it to commemorate all of the drinking in the story of Esther, perhaps they're interested in rectifying all of the wine, all of the misuses of wine in the world, and on Purim they want to elevate it to a level of holiness, then by all means. But if by drinking they're going to be involved, God forbid, in activities which are counterproductive to a religious observance, then I think they should curtail their activities. That's my opinion. Not everybody would necessarily agree. Purim Sameach. Shalom, shalom, shalom.
To support these messages and see more, go to www.nachlaspresents.org.
Hope you enjoyed the message.